Poquito, Poquito Podcast. Poquito, Poquito Podcast. Poquito Podcast.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Ryan Reyes.
I'm Josh the American.
And this is Un Poquito. This week we're joined by an amazing comedian and friend, Carissa Gomez. How's it going?
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I try to do we're all doing our best, right? We're all it's okay. It's okay. I get brain freeze too. It's almost like a hiccup in your brain, you know? You're like, okay. I understand.
It's like a very common thing for me because I have ADHD. It's like that thing when you start thinking about walking and then you forget how to walk because you're thinking about it too much.
Does that ever happen to you when you breathe?
No, but sometimes I do stop breathing.
Oh my God, I've encountered something like that, just not in the pool, but you know, it's almost like the same phenomena, like when you're going into a room or you're walking into a room, you're stuck in the hallway, you're like, why the fuck am I here?
Yeah. So we met, I want to say before COVID, like 3 years ago.
Yeah, at Chatterbox.
At Chatterbox.
We met at
Famous
Chatterbox. Yes.
You are doing a lot of shows right now.
Yeah. Yes, I am. I'm doing as much as I can with very little. Very little. I feel like sometimes I run myself thin, and I know that is also not good, given my kind of fragile brain chemistry. I have to catch myself to make sure that I'm not pushing the limits on my own abilities, my own mental and physical abilities. Yeah. But I definitely think that's something that we have in common. Because we have different diagnoses, but there's a lot of if I remember correctly, there's a lot of similarities between I'm going to say this is probably the most kitschiest way that people have heard it. It's like a spectrum of diagnoses, but given your diagnosis, you have ADHD, right?
Yeah, ADHD and ASD are the primary diagnoses. Right.
So on the other spectrum, the other side of it is schizophrenia. There's things with bipolar schizophrenia, stuff like that. And then there's just schizophrenia all the way towards the end.
Right.
But I feel like it's kind of like a Venn diagram where when we are stressed, our symptoms show up similarly.
Yes.
And that's how I see, because I've thought that maybe my doctors might have misdiagnosed me as well, but I feel like it's correct given the many times that I've been in the hospital for the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And then the certain drugs that they've given me and how those drugs react to my brain chemistry, I knew it was correct. So it's like a whole, it was a huge paradigm shift when I was diagnosed with it, because then it was well, what do I do with this? What now? What kind of information? So it forced me at the same time while I was going through it. I don't know if a lot of people do that, but it was challenging learning my symptoms, learning how to live with it, and then learning how to go about saying, okay, so what do I do? I don't know if that's usually the way a lot of people go down that route. Most people, when they think of schizophrenia, they think of the most extreme forms of it. And I've been in those extreme pockets, those episodes those are the ones that landed me in the hospital multiple times. I've been in those extremes. But when you're not too close off of the edge, or if you've not fallen, you do have to learn how to stop yourself from getting there.
Right.
And that was part of the treatment, going to see your therapist regularly and things like that. It was more like getting re-educated about who you are now.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities and contrasts between that and I can only speak for my journey with autism, but I do see correlating experiences in that. The part of it where you're kind of having to reevaluate who you are as a person now, because the things that were part of your development were actually symptoms of something.
Yeah, right. Or your response to stress, they came out in
Yeah.
symptoms. Yeah.
I do feel like at least what would be a contrast between our particular experiences is like, would it for me with autism, it was about unlearning certain procedures, where it sounds like for you were learning new mechanisms.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I was definitely learning, because it was like, I wouldn't say it was a sudden onset, but it was a drastic sudden onset. It was like during my adolescence, I can tell that, I was getting more depressed and I did not know why, and it was like I almost stopped. It stopped me in my tracks in terms of like, and this is something people do at that, and that forces you to kind of reanalyze, like, am I making these, kind of like not landmark, but like when children reach certain stepping stones, certain kind of pivotal moments in their development. I would ask around, like, other people, other kids my age. I would be like, I was like 14 and I was like, do you feel this way? Like, do you feel empty inside too? And they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, so I'm having an existential crisis at the age of 14. Like, that was funny. I mean, in hindsight, it's funny to me thinking about that, but most kids were just like, well, I want to go to prom and shit. And I was just like, I just want to live. I just want to live. Then I want to make it till I'm 18. You know what I mean? And then they were like, I would always ask my mom and she was like, nah, you're fine. And I think that's what made it harder, was because my parents, they're Mexican, they're Latino. Right. They don't believe in mental health. They just don't. They didn't believe it until they saw me struggle with it, And then once I struggled with it, and I was trying to make an effort to, like, well, I don't want this to be my undoing, and it's not like an overt acceptance. It's not like it's not a complete ignorance, but it's almost like a fear of it. Like, well, if we accept this, what does this make us as parents? For them, at least, that it was a contention of, it was challenging their pride. Right. And I was like, you have to understand, when it comes to mental health, that shit doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, I do think that was an aspect of my parents as well. I want to say, like, my mom did a lot for me growing up. Mm-hmm. She was a huge advocate, especially like when we would reach moments where the school not necessarily didn't want to deal with it, but like when they didn't know how. So their only option, like I remember in elementary school, they got very close to putting me in the special ed course, which is like a very simplified like version of school, because they didn't know how else to handle it. And like my mom pushing for that actually influenced the school's reaction to it. And they started changing like the programs that they would put in place for kids like me, who like, it wasn't that we were unable to learn. It was like that we were processing. We were just different from everyone.
Right. I mean, that might be a good reason why, things like that happen. It's because, it's almost like, I'm not going to say it's an epiphany, but it's a huge realization that I think a lot of people, they themselves cannot process when they're coming to terms with that. And then it's like, well, if you see that you don't even live with it, but if you see that it's hard for you to process it, imagine the people living with the illness, how much we have to process just to come to terms with it. And it's so strange too, because I remember people used to always kind of like ask me, well, what is it not living with schizophrenia? And I was like, to be honest, I have no idea.
Right. I
have no idea what it's like to have normal brain function. I've never been given that luxury. I mean, granted, when you're a child, you're kind of like, you run around, you're like, I don't know if it's enjoying life, but you're not as conscious and aware of it.
Yeah, it's a thing of like, in most circumstances, a child doesn't know the difference until they're older.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, like it's funny, like when people would be like, "Oh, you just gotta listen to your conscience," you know, like. And then I would ask, like, what, you know, like in Pinocchio, like, what's your conscience? It's like, it's an inner voice, and I thought, which one do I listen to? You know, like, how many do you have too? And then that's when I started thinking, this might be something different, you know, because.
Yeah.
I mean, some people don't even have. This is what I found out too. Some people don't know. What are you laughing?
I was just learning about this like literally like
Yeah.
2 days ago that some people have no imagination basically.
No. I'm not, well, I mean, that too, yes. But I'm
That's
saying
crazy.
some people don't have an inner dialogue.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I can't even.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't even understand.
Right, or an inner monologue. That's one voice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
monologue,
I essentially, most people have, or they're supposed to have an inner monologue. I feel like I have an inner dialogue. You know, like it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like a back and forth. Sometimes it's, you know.
I feel like I do that too, though. I feel like I do that. Yeah, like I'll ask myself questions and answer my questions.
I know, but I mean, some people, it's not just that. It's like, that is okay. That's fine. But it's like when it comes to the point where sometimes it's like there's fear attached to it. There's just like, there's other symptoms, not just the inner dialogue. There's other symptoms. There's fear attached to it. There's delusional thinking. There's irrational fear and action behind the delusional thinking. And then it's like trying to figure out, well, why do I feel like this guy next to me, for me at least, why do I feel like this guy next to me on the treadmill wants to kill me or something like that? It's like that kind of, you know, like it's not, you know, it's paranoia. It's a lot of other things attached to it, you know, and it's almost like the extreme symptoms of it too. And then sometimes it also, because I was very afraid of the dark, and you know I still kind of am too sometimes, because you know it's like right, but it's like my imagination will fill that void, you know, and I'm like, you need to don't do that, because I know I'll run with it, you know.
I used to have this very vivid. Well, I have this very vivid memory of being little, like a lot younger, and it was like one of the first times I ever had to take out the trash when I was a kid. And I remember taking the trash out to the street at night and just looking down my street, and it was just dark, and I just literally couldn't see anything. And I just got in my head of being like, dude, anything could be right there in the darkness.
Yeah,
you know?
and you're just filling in that void. Okay,
inside.
So that feeling that you have, imagine that being constant, even during the day.
Yeah,
that's what schizophrenia feels like. It's that
pure fear.
Yeah, and then it's just like, well, why, you know? And you're trying to calm yourself down from it, but it was so difficult for me to even get to this point right here where I am, you know, because I remember even when I first met you, I was still going through it. Like I was still going through it. I mean, probably as much as like a year ago, I was still going through it, you know. And these are things that you learn in therapy, where they're like, they teach you to establish boundaries and stuff like that, kind of reassessing what you're comfortable with. Sometimes people get upset by that because they don't understand. And then you just, you know, you end up cutting connections because they don't understand that. And you know, it's unfortunate. I've had situations where I've had people where I've asked for space and they didn't understand that, and they took offense to it. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? You know, you don't understand what I'm going through and where I've gone through, and that I need time to slow down.
Yeah, I definitely, obviously it's a different, you know, specific experience, but I definitely experienced that a lot with just generally, let me retake that. I think that a lot of different neurodivergencies, that's a common problem, where you're constantly having to explain to people why it's different.
Right.
Like even going back to what you said, a lot of different aspects of what looks like how everyone functions, it's different with neurodivergent people because it's that all the time, or it's that to a particular, the way I explain it to people is like what defines disabling is it's a function in the brain that's to such an extent that it disrupts your ability to function.
Right, or to process things the way other people do. At least that's how I see it, And sometimes it's not even necessarily that we need them to understand, but it's more like we need space and time.
Yeah.
Because we do things at a different rate than other people do.
Yeah. It's more that like they need to understand.
Yeah,
so
they
that,
just, and it's not even like the worst thing to ask for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For somebody to say, oh, hold on, I'm having trouble here, just give me some space. But people will take offense to that.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And I feel like if somebody told me, hold on, I need some time, I need to think, I'd be like, all right, cool, take your time. Because it's nothing on them. We're not asking anything on them. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I'm always just amazed at that kind of stuff. It just blows my mind. That kind of stuff. Like I may have gone into the depths of my own, decrepit mind, but that kind of stuff really blows it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff, like, I'm sure there's like a lot of, you were saying like stereotypes and that people have ideas from like movies and stuff like that.
Where they think we're going to come out with a knife and, like that has happened, but.
But they deserved it.
Yeah, that, exactly. Yeah, because they weren't giving me my space.
No, but I mean, like, I'm sure people because I've known people who like treat these kind of things that they only are ever exposed to it through like movies and stuff like that. Like it's not real, or
right?
Like it's not something that people actually have to deal with, and
right?
Like has real world
consequences
exactly.
and repercussions. Right. But it does, and it can come in different forms. It comes in the form of delusional thinking. Sometimes it's not even stuff that you see, and people always expect us to look a certain way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They expect us to always be disheveled. Dude, I've known people who have the same diagnosis as me, and they work in an office. They work at those kinds of jobs. They have like, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the movie A Beautiful Mind. That guy had it, and he worked for the federal government. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like that's the kind of crazy. People don't see it because they don't see what we see, you know?
That was such a good reference because I remember, I think there's an article on it, but it was long ago, about how even the family of that guy was like, well, the film's a little over-exaggerative.
Right.
And it's a thing of like determining whether or not it's necessary, because movies in some cases have to do that to give like a physical representation.
Right. The drama, the dramatic, theatrical look to it.
And
yeah.
it's only 2 hours. You have to boil a bunch of stuff down
Exactly.
to get the point across.
But so while that is necessary for the film itself, that always runs the risk of like misrepresenting what's actually happening.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're always going to think that, are we always seeing stuff?
Yeah.
Yes and no,
Yeah.
I feel like when I start seeing things, or when I have now at least, because before it used to be very difficult to keep in check. But when I start seeing, I start having some symptoms, it creeps up on me. It's because I'm not managing my stress.
Right. That was the other thing.
Yeah.
That it's when people learn to cope with it, that is usually what's bringing up is like the, what are they called? Triggering stressors.
Right. Exactly. Triggering stressors. That's a big thing. Triggering stressors can, as unfortunate as it seems, it can also come from like interactions with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if it's like relationships that you've had for a long time. And I think when I was learning about that kind of stuff, the biggest thing that my doctor told me was, do you have established boundaries? You know what I mean? And are you communicating those?
Yeah.
And because of the fact, my parents are Latino, they don't understand what boundaries are.
Right.
Right? They had to cross one to get here, you know? So, you know what I mean? Like, that's,
That is so funny.
like, they didn't.
All they do is cross boundaries.
Right, exactly. So that was a big realization. I mean, it's true though,
That's
you
so
know?
funny.
That was a huge realization. And when I was telling my therapist that, when I was going through it, they're like, you got to be able to establish your boundaries. And I said, I don't think you understand. You know, it's in our culture. So
You're illegally immigrating my emotions right
right,
now.
exactly. But it's true though. And that's something that I've had to, you know, when they started seeing me that I was suffering more and more and more, my therapist, well, I've had multiple doctors, like different doctors, and they saw that it was becoming unmanageable, like completely. You know, they were asking, well, what can we do? And I was like, I'm glad you stepped up. So I had my therapist explain to them what boundaries are. Having someone else explain to your Latino parents that they need space, that was a big thing for them, because they were like, whoa, did we, you know, because the whole thing about being Mexican, you know, and coming to this country was to give everyone a better life. And so they always kind of held that up. Well, we didn't give you a good life. What, you're not happy? That has nothing to do with it.
Right.
No, it's giving giving your children a sense of autonomy over their own life.
Yeah.
You know, and granted, that's hard to do since most of us probably still live with our parents. You know, I'm guilty of it.
I live with my parents.
Yeah,
so.
I'm guilty of it, and it's so entrenched in the way we're raised and things like that we have to be around our elders and stuff like that. But also, they don't understand that we are our own people.
Right.
We are our own individual, and in order for us to grow and thrive as human beings, we do need to be ourselves. We do need to have a sense of control. You know, it can't just be, well, because grandma told me that's good, you know? Like, that's, who fucking cares, dude? She's living a different life in her head.
Yeah,
She's in
yeah.
a different generation in her mind. This is a new generation. And, you know, as much as I'd like to say, I'm glad my grandma's dead. Because I remember when she was alive, I love my grandma, but she was funny as hell. But I remember when she was alive, she had these ridiculous standards about, you know, the way we should live.
Right.
And I was like, you're just so out of touch, Grandma. I know you've been almost around for an entire century.
Yeah. And I feel like it's not even that they don't understand. I feel like it sort of goes along the same lines as that part of them that's like,
embracing tradition and things like that.
It's like even just, you know, capitalism is a huge ingrained part of like modern culture, and that's a thing that I think also influences it, where like this is how it was always done for everyone.
Right.
And this is just what was described as how normal people live. And so like, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second.
Normalcy, it's changing normalcy.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was like, where it's like a lot of older generations will always think that the younger generations have more to complain about. And it's like, no, it's like we're just being more vocal about what we've been feeling, but everyone's been feeling it the whole time.
Right.
Like it does make sense to them, but they're so ingrained in that internal like muscle memory of like, but you're not supposed to talk about it.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And that is a thing that this generation is breaking.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, you know, as much as, I mean, we're basically doing a Yelp review of the fucking assholes that raised us. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, hey, you guys screwed up. Sorry. We're gonna retake it. We're going to reclaim, you know, what you guys should have done. You know what I mean? Like, as much as it sounds like, I understand what my parents' generation did, you know, but at the same time, there were things that they neglected about themselves.
For sure. And I think they gave that up in exchange for like a lot of the mentality for old generation Latinos was like, don't stick out. You're not different.
Right.
You're trying to be normal. I named Joshua and Ryan and Carissa.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my mom had this thing about white supremacy. You know what I mean? She just
Okay.
No, not that she embraced it, but she knew that it existed, and she was like, "You're living in a white society
No,
now."
that's what I'm
You
saying.
know what I
It's
mean?
Like they don't want us to stand out. They
Right,
want us to
exactly.
fit into the
Yeah,
thing. So,
yeah, they
so
want
being
it-
like, I think different, or like having neurodivergency to those old generations is like, what are you doing? Like,
Right, exactly.
Keep your head down.
Exactly. So being neurodivergent would bring more attention to
Right,
us.
yeah.
Right. And I think that probably goes back to immigration,
For
you
sure.
know,
Yeah.
because they don't want to be caught and then deported.
yeah.
And I mean, I do have this joke where like, I remember my mom raising us to not cry. Like that was a big thing, you know what I mean? Like we weren't allowed to cry in public, especially me because I'm white and my mom's like, she's darker than me, you know? So she would be like, if you cry, they're going to think that I kidnapped you.
That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, you know, and I grew up with that mentality. Okay, we don't cry in public. We cry only in the restroom when she whoops our ass. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then once she became an American citizen, she still did that shit. And I'm like, Mom, why are you still doing this? I can cry
I can
now.
cry now.
Yeah, you're not gonna get deported. Like, what are we worried about?
No, you can't show weakness.
Exactly.
It's
yes,
those kind
you
of
can
things,
show
you know?
weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta be on 10.
Exactly. Yeah. That's.
Yeah, my grandpa used to always tell me straight up, like, keep crying and I'll give you something to cry about.
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
mentality, you know?
that's
Yeah.
a big thing. Yeah, keep crying. Yeah, I'll give you something to cry about. Or like my mom would be like, "This is gonna hurt me more than it hurts you."
Right,
you know?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like, come on, hit yourself after that. Let me whip your ass. You know?
Yeah. I love you, Dad.
No.
No, but I mean, it's true. It's true. It's always, and I always thought it was funny, you know, because my mom would be like, "You're gonna thank me for these ass whoopings. Gonna make you into a better person."
Right.
And then I grew up thinking, "Yeah, Mom, it did. It put me into therapy. At least I'm addressing it. You know what I mean? I am gonna be a better person."
And it's
funny.
funny how that conversation kind of turns the tables now. It's like, Mom, this is going to make you a better person, I swear. Just go to therapy.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. And then they think that's like the worst thing, you know? Like, I don't want to talk about my feelings to a complete stranger, but they don't understand. There's the things, the confidentiality, you
Right.
know? I don't know. I kind of grew up thinking maybe my mom was more paranoid than I was, and it just kind of leaked into that, you know?
Yeah, I definitely have parents who even till recently, I said parents, I meant family members. Slip of the tongue. No.
No, I
like-
mean, but your family does raise, like, everybody, it takes a village, right?
Right.
Everybody
yeah.
raises you, yeah.
But I do, like, I tease my dad a lot about it, about how I think his original concept for what therapy was like someone telling you what to do. And it's like, no, they're just there as a completely objective perspective. That rhymes.
Right. No. That's true.
In order for you to analyze, like, it's not about finding what's wrong with you. It's about helping you understand that those things aren't wrong. They're just part of existing, and you can feel better about it afterward. Like,
Right.
it's about helping you find peace with yourself.
Right.
It's like just the science version of meditation.
That's funny.
Yeah, but it's also it's having that objective, you know, kind of the external look, because you cannot see yourself
Yeah.
from the outside. You
That's
just
what
you
it
don't
is.
see
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, you don't see that. As much as you argue with yourself on the inside, you don't see what other people
Yeah.
see.
It's still
Right.
you.
Yeah, it's still you. Yeah, it's still part of the same brain, and you know you're coming up with your own answers and shit. You know.
Yeah, and I think that's why that's the common trope whenever a therapist is like in media. It's like, well, how does that make you feel? It's like they're asking that because they're trying to get you to be okay with thinking about yourself.
Right.
Yeah. And trying to get you to keep mulling over the
Yeah.
idea, right?
And I'm a big supporter of that, mostly because like that's been a huge part of me developing after diagnosis. Like, the vacuum turned off, and
I
that
know.
felt like my brain turned off. I was
I
like,
didn't
dang
realize
it.
how loud
Oh,
it
being
was.
able to process.
Turn it back on. I
yeah,
forgot what I was saying.
being able to process your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. That's been a part
like
of you.
being able
Yeah.
to understand. For me, being able to understand why things were happening to me, the biggest thing that helped me with that was it allowed me to establish when things are because of my own choices and when things are involuntary. You know, like we talked about it at the beginning of the episode, I sometimes suffer from executive dysfunctioning. I have like a brain, I forget the actual, because executive dysfunction is a wide term for different like phenomena in the brain. One of them is like my brain pauses. Let me do that again. One of them is like my brain pauses, and it's hard to explain to people because it's a feeling that you can't understand unless you feel it. Like when my brain is pausing, what I mean is like it's not because I don't want to do something or I don't know how to do something. My brain has the information necessary to do it. It's just for whatever reason numb in that second. It's not applying it. You know, it's kind of like
Like the record scratches?
yeah. Yeah, it's like a sudden record scratch. Like for whatever reason, it just skipped over this
I mean,
part.
like, it's kind of like what we were saying, like when you walk into a room and you don't know why you're
Yeah.
It
there
just goes
anymore.
blank and you're like, okay.
Which is like that's a common phenomena to explain to people. But it goes back to that thing where it's like, but for someone with ADHD, it's that to
It happens often. It happens more often
it's
than...
that to a
Right.
degree that it's debilitating.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's like I brain freeze. I stop thinking. So like suddenly I'm on the bus and I forgot where my stop was, and now I'm in a different city. You know, it's like
Right.
it's not just forgetting the last 10 seconds. It's like forgetting what I'm doing right now, or it's not always even forgetting. Sometimes it's just like not being able to just start when you're doing something. Like, again, referencing the beginning of this episode, I sometimes brain freeze when I'm doing the intro, and I literally just forget how words work.
That's actually funny. I think. Oh no! I wish that would work for my feelings. You know, I'm forgetting. Yeah, it does. It does, though. I do.
Yeah.
That's also another thing too. It's almost like when I'm just going through it, I detach from reality a lot. That's something that I don't think people know. Now, sometimes it can be fun detaching, and I always try to explain it to people. The same feelings that people get when they're high, like that detachment from reality, you know, and they're just kind of like floating in their head. That's what I get on a regular basis.
Right.
You know, it can be debilitating when it's paired with all the other shit,
Right.
you know. But lately it's only been kind of fun. You know what I mean? And I always like to tell people do drugs to have my brain.
That's
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do drugs to have your brain off of drugs. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I know what you mean.
the regular function, you know, like the doctors will put me on drugs so I could feel here right now, you know. But at the same time, sometimes I started realizing, man, this is just a trauma response. This is just a survival technique my brain developed because reality fucking sucks. You know, like when I started seeing how everybody lives, I'm like, I don't want to be a part of this, you know? So yeah, that's just the big realization that I came to when they had me on all the antipsychotics and
Right.
antidepressants. I was like, I don't want to live this life, you know? Like, what the hell am I doing? You guys don't even want to live it, you
Right.
know?
That's such a funny analogy, though, because what came to mind when you said, like, I take drugs to have your brain off drugs, was that old, like, Johnny Depp ad where it's, like, with the egg.
Is your brain on drugs?
Yeah, because the
egg.
reverse would that would be him trying to put the fried egg back into the
Yes.
shell.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. I have never thought about it. But yeah, that's a visual analogy of what it's like. You can't go backwards. That's like having an abortion in abortion, you know?
Yeah. It's like
Oh,
those
no.
TikToks where they're taking the shell off, but they're trying to put it back together without popping it.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, no. I've noticed, like, because I am technically unmedicated. They do have me they have me on an antidepressant, but it's only to sleep because they notice that obviously I think we've had the same issue where lack of sleep, that's a big stressor.
Yes.
Lack of sleep can just it's almost like a domino effect. It will tip you into it, you know?
Yeah, that's something I talk about a lot because growing up, I had like pretty severe insomnia, and it is exasperated by my stress levels. So
Right.
like my senior year was wild to me, like very on the cusp of being dangerous. I remember the longest that I went about 2 weeks where I didn't get no sleep because I would probably like have passed out, but I was getting like, I was sleeping once every like 3 days for like half an hour to an hour.
I've had that before.
And it got to the point where I was starting to see there's this phenomena with sleep deprivation where it starts off with orange dots. Mm-hmm. And the way it was described to me is it's kind of like when there's like overheating in a camera where you start to see orange specks on the film. It's a similar phenomenon. Your brain is like, your eyes are short circuiting. So it's like the little light bulbs, the little LSD light bulbs on the screen are starting to burn out.
LCD,
yes.
LSD is a different thing.
Yes.
Is it like, have you guys ever done that when you were a kid where you press your fingers on your eyes and the pressure that causes, like your rods and cones, you'll start like fucking it up?
It's like
I
similar.
do that shit all the time.
But it starts off
Shut
like,
up. You do that on a regular basis?
Not like a regular basis,
Oh,
but
okay.
every now and then I'll like touch
But
my
you know what
eyes.
I'm talking
Oh, I know
about,
exactly
right?
what
When
you're
you
talking
put
about.
too much pressure, I
And
know
you
that
can see the
feeling.
imprint.
You gotta see the
start,
colors.
yeah.
You wanna
it
see the
is
colors.
identical, but it's like when your eyes are open. So you start seeing little orange dots in your visage. And I used to think stuff was in my eye, like in my eyelash. But
Yeah.
after a while, because I did sometimes have shit in my eyes. After a while, I was like, no, that's like what I'm seeing. And then so the phases I've heard are, it starts with orange dots. The orange dots become darker. They turn into black dots. The black dots grow. And then your brain starts to do something to cope with it where it doesn't understand what's happening. It thinks something is in front of you. So it starts to form images that'll make it'll make the image make sense to the brain, even if it doesn't make sense to the eyes.
Like
I
it
think
compensates.
I know what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah,
And
it's like
so-
you're playing a Rorschach, but your brain is doing it.
your brain is
Your,
trying to-
your eyes do it naturally. There's like a spot on your eyes where the cornea is attached to the back, and you have
Yeah.
no vision in that one spot, but your eye just like goes like, oh, this is what would
That's
be here.
crazy.
Yeah, and
Here I was
so-
thinking I was like,
There's like a trick you can do that I learned on the internet where you can like put your thumb in like the perfect place and it'll just go away.
really?
Yeah.
And so with this, with the
And you'll be
phi-
like your thumb will just be gone. Sorry.
No. So with this, what the phenomenon turns into, and this is why sleep deprivation insomnia is so dangerous, is it can develop and become a stressor for other things. It can cause delusion, because once the moment where that is too far is when the black dot starts to turn into like recognizable shapes. The
Right.
most common thing. The most common animals I think people see are a cat, an owl, and then sometimes a penguin, which I think is what the reference is in Fight Club when he sees the penguin, because the whole thing is brought on by lack of
Oh,
sleep.
that's right.
And I think that that's a very clever. Like once I know more about what's happening, I think that's a very clever thing where it's his stressor was he wasn't sleeping, and that led to delusion, that led to the whole other person. And I think that also is like a potential explanation for.
F1 out here.
And it's also a potential explanation for other phenomena, like people associating owls with like paranoia. They think it's alien spying on them, or or
okay.
even the black cat superstition in general.
Yeah.
Might be attributed to people that are experiencing extreme sleep deprivation. and
Oh,
delusion.
okay, that makes sense. I've never imagined cats or owls or anything like that.
Right.
It was usually worse. That's how we knew what it really was. I
Yeah.
was like, but I understand. Like, yeah, the sleep deprivation definitely triggers it. It'll definitely throw you into like, if you didn't like the episode you were going through before, this one it will open up a new one. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's terrifying because you're like, why am I going through this? You know, what am I doing? And it's sometimes it could just be like, just get some rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, it's almost cyclical where you get trapped in like this cycle of like anxiety, lack of rest. Okay. You know, anxiety,
Yeah.
lack of rest, you know, and you're just like bouncing through life within that cycle, you know? So
Yeah, and that's for me. That's like how close it got. It was reaching that point, and that's where I have like a joke I haven't done in forever. But that's where that joke comes from. Is when I was getting assessed for ASD, I thought that I might have schizophrenia because those things were happening, and because at the time I didn't have that context for it. All I knew was that I was starting to see things that weren't there, and that was coupled with diagnoses that I did get later on, like I've been diagnosed with panic disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. I also, that's connected to like specific phobias I have. Like one, I think it's called like osteophobia. It's like the fear of being followed or being watched. I had like specific paranoias that coupled with the deprivation made me think that I had that. And I was assessed for it, and ultimately it was result. What's the word? Based on the assessment, they explained to me, and that's where I started my journey of understanding what was happening. They explained to me that a lot of this could be explained by just resting more, because it was already in my file from when I was a kid that I hardly ever sleep. When I was in kindergarten, I would go like 2 days at a time without any sleep because I just couldn't fall asleep.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I used to have same kind of issue. I don't know if it was whether my brain chemistry was like messed up back then, but I have had multiple head injuries as a child, and then leading on into an adult, I've had multiple head injuries, and I mean, it's some people might say that might be what triggered it, you know, too, because I mean, you know, the guy from NXS.
I think so.
Yeah, the singer, he had like a really bad injury, a really bad head injury, and then never came back from that.
Yeah,
and that was the reason why he killed himself, was because of that. He just kept spiraling, and I think that does have an effect on you physically. Yeah,
I mean, for sure. I think there's plenty of cases of head injuries radically changing people's behavior.
Right. Yeah.
Gary Busey.
Yeah.
Like that's what happened to him. Yeah.
Yes.
I feel bad now because we were making Gary Busey jokes.
I
earlier.
mean,
we were making Gary Busey jokes earlier. It's true.
But I mean,
but he's a great example. After his accident, he was never the same.
Yeah, it's still a legitimate thing. I've told my doctors that, you know, and they're like, yeah, but the brain damage is already there, so what do you have to worry about? And I was like, well, thanks for making me feel better about this, you know. I don't know. It's
even kind of like a classic cartoonish trope of like hitting someone on the head and then them being different and then having to hit them on the head again to like fix them.
Right. Yeah. Like a broken television. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's, I mean, I did have a joke about me, like my mom hitting me so hard it was like a broken television. She thought she could fix me, you know, but that.
She's just like,
Because I mean, you know, when you grow up in poverty, you know,
what is a football school?
Right. They have the televisions that turned color, the cathode ones, you know, they put the magnet on it and then you got the purple streak or the yellow streak on it. You're like, why does it look like this?
No TV was getting out of my house alive.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like that's how we grew up, you know, like there was a complete, I'm not gonna say an ignorance to it, but it was a complete like lack of awareness for that kind of thing, right? Yeah, and obliviousness, to it. It's like, well, I don't know what happened, you know, but it was like it was everything that led up to that, everything that happened in our childhood that led up to this point in our lives, you know, and it's so strange that some people will still blame themselves for it, but it's like, don't, you know, you just got to learn how to live with it now. Yeah. So it's been. So you were talking about you in high school. You had those incidences with.
Yeah, and it led to this joke about. Based on the assessment, he tried to be very reassuring that I didn't have it. I think the only thing he said was like, if you did, right now you have no clear like signs of actual episodes. So if you did, you're not showing right now, at the very least, it would be acute schizophrenia, which means we'd have to wait until an actual episode happened to... He said something along those lines, but that was just his attempt to reassure me. I think ultimately what was decided was like, I showed signs of paranoia and I showed signs of anxiety, but nothing conclusive to support the idea that I was specifically schizophrenic. It was more just paranoia... Anxiety and paranoia disorders coupled with being autistic. Yeah.
Telling somebody that has signs of paranoia that they have signs of paranoia must be a tightrope to walk as a doctor.
I had a joke like that never worked. It was like a very dumb like newspaper comic strip joke of like, telling a hypochondriac you're just being paranoid.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that's true. That's very meta. That's a very meta joke. It's like a mirror within a mirror within a mirror. You're like, and you know, like I always compare it to this because I remember when I was a kid, I used to always think like, oh, this is interesting. You know, when you go into like dressing rooms and they have the two mirrors that are like wall to wall, and you're like looking through it, you're like, is that, you know, like, because I always loved Alice in Wonderland, and the way they used to travel into mirrors into different dimensions. When I saw that as a kid, then I started saying, oh, this makes sense now because that's how my brain is. You know, it's like you're going into a different dimension without really having to leave this one.
Yeah.
Right. I had a similar experience. I want to say it was more just that I had pent up energy. Mine was Blue's Clues. I tried to skidoo into photos, and I just ended up like breaking my family photos.
Like he just jumped into pictures.
I just tried to jump at a picture, yeah.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Hilarious.
He does it on the show. I think that is a different thing, though, because I don't think that in my looking back, I don't think it was that I thought that I was going into a different world. It was that my brain hadn't developed the dissidence. Is that the right word? Dissidence?
I don't think so.
Cognitive. Oh, you mean like cognitive dissonance, or because cognitive dissonance, like differentiation,
right?
Right. Yeah.
Yes, I think it is the right word. It's like when it's similar to like when most kids like they see an old movie and they can't understand that was a long time ago, that actor is older now.
Oh, okay.
In a similar.
In the similar vein of.
In a similar vein, it was like I didn't know magic wasn't real, which is a common thing with children, but it was like mine was to the extent that I was trying to jump into photos.
Yeah.
Like mine was an ironically literal interpretation of imagination.
And you know what? That's another thing too. I don't think that people understand. We take things very literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, when I'm getting to know someone new, I always tell them the best thing to do is to be direct with me.
Yeah.
You know, because until I learn how you talk, and then I can understand like the way your voice, the inflection of your voice, the way you mean certain things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. At the very least, like I'm going to ask a lot of questions to figure that out.
Right, exactly. And then I'm going to be in doubt. Yeah, exactly. I ask a lot of questions. And I'm like, what do you mean? You know, and some people will fuck with me and I tell them, don't do that, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely people that like, sorry to...
No. Go ahead.
I'm not going to name names, but there have been a few comedians that talk to me like that. And it's like, I think you're a chill person. I know that you don't mean anything by it, but from my perspective, you're fucking with me. And so you're not someone I want to have serious conversations.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
It's like, you're dope, but we're not homies.
Right. And I've had issues with people like that too, where I'm like, you just got to be direct with me, and until we get to know each other a little bit more, and then I understand how you joke around, you know. Like I've had people that were very accommodating. I had a friend that he lives in LA, and when we were first hanging out, when he would tell a joke, he would do this. He would tap on his nose and be like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. You're joking with me, you know? And it was funny too, because it was kind of cute, you know? And then once I started get to know him, then I was like, oh, okay, I know when you're joking with me, you know? And like I could hear his voice start to speed up, you know? Like it's more like learning people's behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
You know? Because I feel like I was kind of really messed up in terms of like picking up on social cues too. Right. You know, and that kind of like, I know it doesn't seem like I don't, you know, because most of the time I just ignore it. I just ignore it just to be polite. I'm like, all right, I don't bring it up. But it took me a while when I started doing stand up. I used to do this thing where people would look at me and they'd be like, do you have a name? And I'd look at them and be like, yeah, I do. I have one, you know, and they're like, well, what is it? And I said, well, I don't use it, you know, and they're like, no, what's your name? And I'd be like, oh, you're asking me what my name is, you know, it's Carissa. I was not good at introducing myself. I would just stand there and stare, you know, I was like, yeah. So it was a weird thing. And the only thing I could compare it to is, you know, when you go to Walgreens, you pick up your meds and then they ask you what your number is. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not good at this because I don't call myself. You know, it was like that. Like me telling somebody my name, it was like, well, I don't call myself. You know, I don't say my name to myself.
I understand.
I mean, it would be funny if I was staring at myself in the mirror saying, Carissa, you could do this, you know, but that's a different.
I knew someone like that, but that's Alzheimer's.
Oh, that's Alzheimer's?
Just, you don't recognize
They
yourself.
had dementia? Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, sure. You know, like they, I mean, because I go to the gym a lot because it helps me manage like a lot of my stress.
Right.
I do it so much where if I don't do it, then I feel like I'm lopsided, you know? But when like I needed help at the gym, mostly because of the social anxiety. Like I feel like that was the worst part, was doing the social anxiety.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. So I told my personal trainer, I was like, it's not the fact that I don't want to do the exercises, it's the fact that there's other people in the gym. And he didn't understand that. And then I explained to him, well, I have this. And then he was like, okay. So then he gave me like exercises where I could do alone in the little multi-purpose room.
Oh, cool.
Right.
Until I started getting like confidence. But the way I got confident, I kind of faked my way through my confidence. I would get like the out of order signs and put them on the machines next to me, so people won't exercise.
That's funny.
Next to me, you know, like. And I sometimes when I'm still like having a fucked up day, I'll do it. You know, I'll find like the papers, or I'll print out my own, and and I'll take them with me, and I'll put them on the machines. And then I'll move them, and then people will be like, well, what the hell was that? You know?
That's what I was picturing. Like, how
That's
funny
so
is
funny.
that? Like, you have it on either side, and someone's like, oh, damn. So they go to a different machine.
Right.
But then they see you get off and take
your signs with you.
exactly. They see me take the signs
That's
off.
hilarious.
That feels like one of those, like, UK CCTV
Yeah,
shows.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I've explained that to him. I was like, that was the hardest part about going to the gym and working out. The second hardest part was staring at myself in the mirror, you know,
Right.
like making eye contact. That was hard for me. I can't make, it's so hard for me to make eye contact with myself. It's a weird feeling.
That's funny. I know what you mean because of drugs. When you're on drugs and you stare at yourself in the mirror, you get all weirded out.
Right, but I feel like
Yeah,
that
that's
on drugs. You know, I'm like,
who's
who's that?
No, I have a very similar thing at the gym. I don't. The social awkwardness at the gym is through the roof.
Really?
Yeah, very much so through the roof. And also, I don't like to do the workouts.
Oh God, no!
That doesn't help.
I love doing the workouts now. I love it. Like, well,
When I get into it, I can get into it, but when I'm not into it, I'm not into it.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's where I just came from. I was at LA Fitness right now,
nice.
like before. I was at this LA Fitness right here, and then I was like, I still have to take a shower, so that's why I was like, can I get here a little bit later?
Oh, you're good.
But yeah, I just, when I miss like even one day, I start feeling even worse, you know?
Right.
And I don't know if anyone can understand that, you know, it's almost like it's part of my daily schedule where it's like, okay, Tuesday we're doing this,
Right.
Thursday we're doing this, Friday we're doing this.
If you break
know?
that routine, does it?
Right.
throw you?
Yes. It fucks with me. If I
Okay.
break
Right.
that, it's almost like I need that routine as like a cornerstone to keep me regular for
Yeah.
other things.
I do think that it's like a very common, it's usually like one of the number one things recommended for people with neurodivergency, regardless of diagnoses, is forming structure. Forming routine builds structure, which builds stability.
Yeah.
Is a common like pillar in coping with neurodivergency. It's so interesting for me because I have ADHD and ASD. So I have parts of my brain that function better with structure. And then I have a part of my brain that requires structure, but it's because it specifically fights it.
Right.
So it's like a very specific struggle with ADHD.
It's okay. Breathe.
A very specific struggle with ADHD, ASD is seeking pattern, but if there's too much pattern, then you don't want to do it anymore.
Right. That's another thing too. This restroom here, nothing but pattern. It made me dizzy. You know what I mean? I was
Oh,
like,
the
I
little
can't.
dots and
Yes,
everything.
I was
Yes.
like, I can't see this.
It's like everybody's
I know.
comment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I know, I
that
hate
is
it.
such an interesting thing too, because I get and I think this might be like the overlapping symptoms.
Right.
You know what I mean? I get the same thing with patterns. because it comes in the form of my clothes.
Right.
I wear a lot of black just to make it easier for me to choose what I want to wear, because if I start having things that are different, then I'm like, all right, maybe I don't want to go out with clothes, like I don't want to wear clothes, because it becomes difficult for me to make a decision like, what am I going to choose to do, And then I feel like it's also kind of like a traumatic response too, because I remember one time this is when my mom was dressing me, when I was wearing clothes, I attempted to do my own laundry and I fucked up her clothes in the process. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just going to go one straight color for the rest of my life. And I chose black.
That's funny. The
know?
exact opposite thing happened to me. One time my mom or my grandma messed up my laundry and I was like, well, I guess I'm doing this for myself for the rest of my life.
But I mean, it was my attempt at trying to do something right. And I end up fucking up anyway. And I'm like, all right.
That's a thing. I have so many stories of like being an adult who people didn't trust in the kitchen and stuff. Like, so I have almost burnt my house down 3 times.
On purpose? No, I'm just...
There's 3 different stories where I left the stove on and we had to go back to the house to turn it off.
That's wild.
And it was a thing of like, because of that, people didn't trust me in the kitchen for a while when I was older. So I doubled down and like got really good at specific skills. Like one thing I always tell people is like, if nobody trusts you in the kitchen, learn how to make pico de gallo, because it requires a lot of knife work. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that, you look like you know what you're doing.
Oh my god. Oh, it also doesn't require cooking.
Yeah. It's
so
like,
you don't have to turn on the stove. Somebody else does it for you. You just get busy cutting stuff and you're like, you know what? I'm busy cutting. Can you do the stuff on the stove? Yeah.
And it's a delicious treat.
Yeah, it is. Do you mix it with like, because I don't know if this is a thing, but I like to eat like pico de gallo with, this is probably weird. I eat it with cucumbers.
No, yeah.
I think that's a normal thing.
I think that's just cucumber salad.
Yeah, all right. Okay, well, I don't call it that. I usually eat like cucumbers with like lemon, salt, or like tahini.
Oh, you're saying you use it like a chip.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you meant you put cucumber in your pico de gallo.
No, I use it as a chip, like.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I don't know. I like.
Seems refreshing.
I don't do that, but I have like a specific recipe for sweet pico de gallo.
What?
Which is like, it's an American thing. It's like Baja California
Oh,
style.
with like mangoes or something?
It's often paired with like fish or chicken. Uh-huh. My personal recipe is, what is it? It was 2 limes, the juice of 2 limes, 2 oranges, fresh jalapeno, red onion instead of white, because I think red is sweeter.
Yeah.
Unless you use yellow, but yellow's too sweet for me. So red onion instead of white, cilantro, salt, pepper, and then
hell yeah,
half a tomato, like the thick ones though. If you're using like Roma tomatoes, like 2 Roma tomatoes, and I add.
That sounds good. Now I want to. I'm like, wait, hold on.
This is like my basic recipe for like enough for like 4 people.
Oh, okay.
And then 1 whole. I used to use mango. I started because it's in season more in California. I started using nectarines.
Oh wow.
So yellow nectarines, not white, because white are too hard to chop. But
we'll have the recipe available after this.
Yeah. What it turns into a cooking show.
I literally, it's my favorite recipe. My brother Dominic is tired of it because it's the one thing I always want to make.
Is this part of the routine thing?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's
you
like
have stability with your routine.
I can't make it all the time or I'll get bored, but when I make it, I like go hardcore. I'm like, I have a specific recipe for the fish batter. I make my own fish sauce from scratch, which is gross because the main ingredient is mayonnaise. I hate the smell of mayonnaise. And the one thing I hate about my own recipe is the fish sauce I make is like a chipotle fish aioli, but I have to taste it to make sure that it tastes right. And for the first like 4 bites, it doesn't taste right yet, and so I'm just eating mayonnaise, and it's gross.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no! God, that's tough.
That's definitely one of those moments where like my ADHD and ADSD like synchronize because it's something that's in my interest, so I'm the most focused about it to the point where like if someone comes in to mess me up, I'm like, I need the entire kitchen to myself. You have to go to a different room.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I know that feeling when I'm super invested in something. I guess this is probably why I get disturbed when people exercise next to me. You know, I feel like I just want to start throwing things like, I'm in my vulnerable spot, you know, I'm focused here, leave me alone. I don't know. I understand that feeling though. You know, it's like you're so immense in doing something, you're afraid if somebody comes near it, you're like, you're going to screw this up, you know?
Yeah.
Don't touch, don't, you know?
And
Like,
it's so funny because I come off like anal retentive, like I don't want them. It's like, but what it is I don't want to fail in front of somebody.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're vulnerable. You're like, I can barely do this on my own, you know? Like, just let me have this moment, you know?
It reminded me of literally like 2 days ago. I was on TikTok live and I was doing my balloons. I haven't done them in like 6 months, so I'm trying to re-practice them. And I was, and I kept getting frustrated with the balloons to a point where now I'm like yelling at the balloons like they're people. I'm like, you're embarrassing me in front of my friends right now. Because I'd say something like, let's do something basic so I don't get stressed out. Let's do the poodle. And then I blow into it and immediately it doesn't inflate. Instead it goes, and I'm like, why are you doing this to me? I told you not to act up in front of people. Like I'm like talking to it like it's a person.
And then like getting super stressed about something that's kind of silly. Like by nature, it's like not really a serious thing.
Yeah,
Like, you're
I'm like
making
getting
balloons.
viscerally angry at these balloons.
Exactly. No, that's funny. That's a funny response to shit. I don't know. I just
It's like embarrassing even if you're successful at blowing a balloon.
Yeah.
I just think that like the cooking thing was like a funny segue, especially because we were talking about mental health, you know,
Right.
like it's, well, this is our routine, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I go through the same thing when it comes to like eating. Like you don't like having the same thing to eat, but I don't know if that's what it is or your brother gets upset with it, but I usually like to have the same kind of meals.
Right.
Like day in, day out. I feel okay with that.
I definitely, it is a common thing where, so a lot of autistic people have a list of like what they consider safety foods. And usually it's like, it's their favorite food because it's a very simplified combination, or it's like such a specific thing that they grew up with that it's their like happy food. A lot of people have happy food, but I'm talking about like, there are people who they forget to eat, so they only eat one thing to make sure they eat. And it's like, there's people that only ever eat like pasta with a little bit of butter.
Yeah.
Or like there's people that love mashed potatoes.
That's so funny.
And so
That's
like
funny.
they like other foods, but to make sure they eat, they almost only eat that one thing.
Yeah.
So crazy. I relate to that so hard.
Well, I've been saying,
Wait,
I
what's
know.
your safety food? What's your safety food?
Dude, grilled chicken and broccoli and
Oh my
carrots. I have like such a
God,
regular
really?
thing.
the worst thing to microwave? Okay.
That's not true. That's not true.
The carrots? Is it because of the carrots or the broccoli?
I think it's
Broccoli and
delicious.
chicken have such a specific scent when you microwave them. It's, I wouldn't say bad, but it is very all-consuming. You can't get that smell out of your house for days.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Is it like it's like rewarming fish in the microwave like
Yes.
that? Oh, okay.
I don't know what it is. Because I love chicken and broccoli, but I hate reheating it.
You gotta work on your methods or something. Maybe it's the way you season it.
No,
Because I'm doing real basic, like nothing's on it.
Like just
Salt.
I do
No.
salt,
Salt and
sometimes
pepper.
butter. With broccoli, it's usually just like maybe
Interesting.
lightly salt.
you eat like a weightlifter?
No. I
Okay,
eat a
because
lot of
you're
junk
like
food.
you're
That's
like
just like my regular.
You're like chicken, broccoli, and
I know.
carrots.
That's like one of
dude.
my
That's-
favorite things to eat. Like if I had that for dinner every night, I'd be okay.
Right.
But during the day, I'm eating anything I can.
Oh, okay,
I'm trying
okay,
to do better.
'cause
I'm trying to do better.
I was gonna say,
but no,
wow.
I do not eat like that.
Oh, I
That's
was
not
gonna.
like the only thing I eat. That's
Oh,
just
okay.
like he was just saying it's like like a safety meal, like a home base.
Yeah,
as a
there's
meal.
definitely foods where like I could eat that every day, and then there's foods that are like they're my favorite, but because of that, I only make them when I'm absolutely craving them.
Yeah.
Like the fish tacos are like sometimes, literally, one time. Sorry, one time I figured out how to make like the perfect mashed potatoes for me. You know what I mean? Like the right consistency I enjoy, the right salt butter balance. So because I was so excited that I learned how to make mashed potatoes from scratch that I made enough for like 8 people.
Oh shit.
And at this time, it was just me and my little brother living together.
Right. I'm just eating a
So
bunch
it's
of
like we
mashed
just
potatoes.
had mashed potatoes for 4 days.
Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah. I know that life.
god. That's
I grew up
funny.
eating Instamash. I love Instamash.
So the thing that you add hot water to?
Yeah, you add
Yeah,
hot
it's like
water,
dried
and then I would add
starch
butter and
flakes.
garlic
Oh, okay.
and other ingredients to make it better.
Oh my God, I hate mashed potatoes though.
You hate it.
I do. The only reason why I hate them is because my mom, I don't know what it is, but like my mom has this tendency to like put potatoes in everything. And so growing up, it was like we didn't have any other options, you know? So now I just hate all kinds of potatoes.
I understand.
I hate all potato. I'm like, nah. Yeah, and I even tell her now, I was like, because she'll make like soup, and I'm like, please don't put potato in it because I'm going to throw up. I hate potatoes. Like,
Interesting. Do you like fries?
Even fries are kind of a
Like hit and miss?
Yeah, exactly.
I understand.
Sometimes if fries aren't, I don't know. It would have to be like super good, like tossed in like truffle oil or
I'm the
something
same
like
way
that.
with-
You know what I mean?
I'm the same way with eggs.
With eggs?
I
Oh
hate
no.
every iteration of like where egg is the main component or the main flavor.
Same.
Every version, literally even I tell people like the only egg form that I tolerate when I'm ever offered eggs is scrambled. But even then, literally the only version I like is the kind my mom makes.
Oh man, no, I love eggs, but I guess I like eggs because it's a quick form of protein, and I'm like a vegetarian, so like
Oh.
it's more like, well, what can I get like real fast, you know,
Right,
and
right,
easy,
right.
yeah.
That makes
But,
sense.
Yeah, no, I feel like I eat a ton of eggs.
I used to eat eggs all the time, and I think that's maybe that thing of the oversaturation.
Right.
It made me have an association, like a negative association with the flavor, to the point where like now the flavor makes me want to
Yeah.
like burp.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
Oh, I know what you mean. My grandma would go hard on hard boiled eggs when I was little, and I just can't.
I do know how to. That's the funny thing too, is like I also know how like a bunch of different ways to prepare eggs.
Right. there's-
My mom does like eggs, so I used to, when I was growing up, I sometimes would cook for her.
Yeah.
Like she taught me how to make fried egg, hard boiled egg, soft boiled egg. I think I know how to make poached egg.
Dang, really? That's hard.
And my grandma taught me, or she didn't teach me, but I watched her, so I learned how to make deviled eggs,
Oh, wow.
which is also actually very simple.
Really?
Eggs are so versatile. It's so unfortunate that I hate them so much.
Oh no, I
I'm not a big
love
fan either.
eggs. Eggs are my favorite. I feel like don't eat enough egg, you know?
right. I'll eat it just because it's good and it's good morning food. You know. You
Yeah,
get some
it's
protein,
quick
like you
and
said.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think deviled eggs are the only iteration of eggs where I enjoy the yolk more than the outside. That was always a huge thing for me. Is
Right.
that weird, like not saltiness, but that just natural savoriness that yolks have is
Yeah.
always just something I didn't enjoy.
Oh, that richness.
Yeah.
Same for me. Like in a hard boiled egg, it's all gray and like thick.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I cannot stand it.
I will say though, that was probably one of the earlier signs that I had autism. Is I used to remove the yolk. It was like a game for me where I would eat the white 1st, and the intent. Eggs are the biggest example, and I will get back to that in a second. It was a concept overall where I liked dissecting my food. So like with eggs specifically, I would eat the white part, and the goal was to leave the yolk intact.
Oh,
And
was it like eating a marzipan?
Yeah.
Where like it before it would crumble?
Yeah.
I did the same thing with corn dogs, where the inside bread stuck to the hot dog, so I would
Yeah.
try to eat the outer crust without removing the inner crust. I did the same thing with chicken nuggets. I would eat the skin first and then eat the nugget.
I had a
Okay,
friend
now
that
the
would
chicken
peel
nugget,
his-
that sounds like a skill right there.
I had a friend who would peel his chicken nuggets, and it would drive me crazy.
What?
I'd
I
be
used to
like,
do-
That's like some
"Stop."
Silence of the Lamb shit, dude.
I don't know.
For real.
You know, like what?
Stop peeling your nuggets.
Hello, Clarice.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It comes
that's
with a Happy
crazy.
Meal.
Oh, that's funny. Right.
Yeah, man. I just said, "Oh man."
Yeah.
Amen.
I don't remember if how much they remember it, but my brothers used to get super annoyed that I did that. Dominic would like call me on it a lot
I'm sure it would drive me
because
crazy.
I would like bite the ends and then just peel off the whole skin and eat it like a chip.
Well, okay, so your brother Dominic, how did he cuz I always feel like when you're talking about mental illness, your siblings know more about you than like your parents do. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like they're more accommodating, like your siblings are more accommodating than your parents are, you know?
I do feel like a part of it, especially with older siblings, is I'm sure it's not with every I almost said iteration again. I'm sure it's not with like every dynamic, but I think a common thing with older siblings is it's a scenario where they're a position of authority like parents, but they have more time with you.
Right.
Because parents are often working or you're
Yeah.
at school, but you'll often find yourself like going to the same schools, even if it was years later or years apart. You know, siblings are always compared to each other.
It's like a friend that lives with you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they
Yeah.
get to know like the ins and outs of you. You know, like they're like, well, don't give Ryan eggs because he's gonna freak. You know, like that kind of thing.
It was always a thing. Like,
yeah.
It's even a thing now where my mom will order the same things over and over when we go to restaurants. And when I was a kid, Dominic would be the one to be like, well, remember, Ryan doesn't... Like, we get Egg McMuffins. He's like, remember, Ryan just gets sausage McMuffins.
Yeah, because of the egg.
After a while, it just became a thing where we would always forget that I don't like the eggs. I just gave it to people.
Oh, okay.
Which worked out for my little brother because he loves the eggs. So he always got like a double egg sandwich.
No,
Yeah.
but I always thought that was funny because like with me growing up and then me getting diagnosed and stuff like that, and then them kind of learning that kind of stuff.
Right.
It always felt like they were a lot more open to it than my parents were, which was kind of sad, you know, that the only safe people that I had in my family were my siblings.
Right.
You know, because they listened, and my parents were like, "No, I'm an adult. You know, like I tell you what to do."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were mentioning that earlier. And I think I was saying something about my parents in that regard. Because as I said before, what was, I don't want to say unique, but what was cool about my dynamic with my mom is that she was always that advocate for me. But I think when it started, it was a thing of like, she knew I wasn't like less intelligent than other children. So she was trying to prove them wrong in that aspect. And that led to us kind of figuring out together what was happening. And once we knew what was happening, it was still something that we had to come to terms with. Even me, like, I do remember that initial feeling, the very first time I was told that I might have autism spectrum disorder, I was resistant to it because the only image I had in my head was like the negative side of it. You know,
Right.
I would think back to the kids, especially when I was in elementary school, that were like in chairs or like and
Right.
like couldn't talk and stuff like that. And so I didn't want to be associated with that. So I was very much like one of those people that creates that distance.
But that's also part of getting diagnosed too. Is you're afraid of that stereotype, and so your thing is to, well, now I have to pretend to be, I have to work harder to
Right.
be normal. And then that's where the pain of living with it comes
Yeah.
from, because it's almost like you're also afraid
Right.
because of the negative connotation that title, that label gives you.
Exactly.
Instead of just accepting it and then saying, well, I guess this is what it is,
Right.
you know?
And that becomes part of my journey. But I think once I did accept it, now, so what I was getting at before was now, even though they were resistant to it at first, at least more specifically, I think my dad had a hard time because he didn't understand what autism was. It became a thing in my situation where I was the point of reference for them.
Right.
Where they were learning about what autism actually is through me. And sometimes, you know, my dad teases me a lot by saying like, well, everyone's a little bit autistic. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
You're just saying that because you also might have autism. There's a there's always like a 30% tile where if it's in kids, there's a chance that it's in the adults.
Right.
And so
that's why,
I always,
and that's why your parents don't think anything's wrong with you, because they're like, well, he's just like me, you know what
he's
I
just
mean?
like
Or
And
like-
yeah,
Or it's even like a subconscious coping where it's like, well, I was told that I had to put up with it. I was told that it's
Right.
just a thing that you just don't deal or don't talk about. You
Yeah.
ignore. So no.
look at me, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Or it's like in the back of their head, they're resistant to you experiencing that because, well, I went through that and they told me no.
Right.
So you're wrong. Like,
Right.
They're in denial.
In denial, yeah.
It's
It's being in denial, yeah. And I kind of felt the same way too when it came to my parents. My dad was a little bit more accepting of it. when I told him, because he was like, "Oh, I'm glad we found out what it was, because we thought something was wrong with you." That's literally what he said, and I was like, "Okay, I'm all right." You know, my mom was more resistant because she thought it was a reflection of her parenting,
Right.
and I was like, sometimes it's not, you know. And then once I got more into therapy, then I started realizing, you know what, she's right. It was her. Yeah, that was the hard
It
part.
certainly didn't help. all
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a funny. Another thing that I'm going back to. Dang it! I had it in my head. It was like another funny thing my dad says. Oh, my dad is one of those Latinos where it's like, well, we didn't have that when we were growing up. We just had kids that we thought were weird. And, or like, I'll have other family members or people in public that'll say something like, all of a sudden you have all of these problems. And my response to both those things is like, no, those did already exist. Now you have a name for it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, or now you're not ashamed to talk about it.
Yeah,
you
like
know
I tell
what
me, it's
mean?
like, yeah, you called them weird, but they were autistic. Like now you know what to call them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. I always thought that was funny, you know, because like me talking about my mental illness in like Latino rooms, sometimes it doesn't fly over well because they don't understand. They're kind of still at that cusp of acceptance. You know what I mean? And I kind of like to associate it with, oh, you guys all have that little weird cousin, you know, that you only call when you're asking for something very specific to be done.
Right.
And then I was like, I'm that weird cousin. You, you know, like don't be weird around us, mija. Go be yourself somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like that's exactly how they would treat me. And, you know, I got used to being in isolation. So,
Right.
you know, I don't get upset with me when I come back with my own friends. You know, you know what I mean? Yeah. So
I was gonna ask how you dealt with that, because you were saying like at the gym you were dealing with like social anxiety and being like self-conscious. Is that the right way to
well,
word it?
I mean, yes, self-conscious, and you know that.
All that to say, I was just trying to ask like how that translated in when you're doing stand-up, when you're like being vulnerable in front of a room full of people.
That in and of itself was tough. It still is, as a matter of fact. It's still sometimes there will be days where I just feel like super sensitive, and I have to push myself through, especially if it's a really good show. I'm like, man, I'm not gonna go and fuck up, you know?
Right.
But what I've noticed is, because I'm already vulnerable, I could just go up on stage and just say, hey, you know what, I'm having a really fucked up day, and I'll make that part of the act.
Okay.
Right.
You know, and then I'll make fun of how I'm having a fucked up day. And for some reason, that seems to work, because people start understanding. They're like, oh, okay, you know, and then I kind of, you know, segue into talking about my mental health when I talk about the fucked up day. And then you know, that it's always like, well, if you guys can't already tell, I do have mental illness. And then they just start laughing. They're like, all right, well, we understand. Now we get it, you know? So yeah, it's more like, because being present was a difficult thing for me to do. Doing stand-up, I would say, helped with those skills.
Yeah. I had a similar experience where, so I wouldn't say that I necessarily had selective mutism, but I did have a problem talking in public, like to the point where I couldn't like go to McDonald's by myself. I had to have someone come with me so that they can order for me. And it was a thing where it was like, once I was comfortable, I did talk a lot to the person I was comfortable with. Outside of that, I was always introvert, and it made it incredibly hard to get to that point with new people. It was hard meeting any new people. And I think that comedy did help me with that, to a similar extent, where it was like, because it was kind of like I learned how to do a stage persona, so I just learned how to recreate that off stage.
Right.
I sound like Dominic with all these odds.
It's so funny how I have such opposite experiences all the time. It's like I'm great at meeting new people, but maintaining relationships is hard for me.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, I mean, that can go in two different ways. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's not even your fault for for the reason why a relationship went down the drain. So like, don't
Right.
blame yourself for that.
Right.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah,
Because
no.
I start understanding this. I used to doing stand up also helped me kind of understand the way like a conversation would go, you know what I
Right.
mean? And then that also kind of helped me understand how to keep and maintain, social interaction, you know what I
Right.
mean? So, and then that's when I started realizing like, oh, this isn't also my fault. Like the other person they have a certain amount of responsibility for
Right,
Yeah.
the
right,
way
right.
things turn out. You know what I mean? Yeah, I will say that doing stand up did help me come out of certain like shells and like kind of
For
try to
sure, for
understand things. Because I mean, for the most part, most of my family was very afraid of me going out in public because they're like, she's going to get hurt and we can't allow her to be out there on her own. And, it was always this kind of like fear for me. Until I learned and I was like, well, that's the way it is for everybody though. Like everybody is at risk of getting hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's not just me, it's everyone.
Yeah, and it's such for me, I think it's like such a specific experience because it definitely like makes me rethink of, I forget where I heard it from, this phrase of like confidence is just having fear but doing it anyway.
Right.
Because I get asked I get asked a lot as a neurodivergent like comedian, how do I cope with that anxiety, like that stage fright, that initial anxiety of speaking in public. And people are like, how did you get rid of that? I'm like, I didn't.
No.
I just learned that I learned to pretend it wasn't there. Because I tell people all the time, like when I'm doing my most successful, there's so much like energy in that and not only like mental strain on me because I'm pretending to like be social, but also like the energy of performing and the actual act of being like a comedian, like reciting things in my head and performing for people is such a more physical thing on the inside that I actually get anxiety after my shows.
Yeah.
I have like close to panic attacks. I used to have severe panic attacks after every one of my shows. And now I still get that feeling, but now I cope with it better.
Yeah, same thing. I actually, if I don't have that feeling, I actually worry. I'm like, I don't know.
Right, like did I give it my all if I'm not sweating after?
Yeah. If I don't have a certain level of anxiety before I go up, I'm like, I'm too calm. This is not right,
That's
It's like the
interesting, huh?
emotional equivalent of like, do you even lift, bro?
Right, yeah, exactly. It is though. But I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I start worrying, and then that's when part of my mind starts thinking, are you just addicted to the stress?
Right.
And some part of it might just be that. You know what I mean? It might just be that.
That makes sense. I haven't had that experience. I'm still pretty new to stand up, and it's still terrifying every single time. I haven't.
Oh, that's good. Keep it.
I haven't
Keep
gotten
it.
to the point where I'm like, do I feel after I get off my show, I go to my car and I play metal.
Oh,
in
no,
Chatterbox
no.
parking lot.
No, okay. See, here's the thing. This is what I've learned through doing all of this is that the anxiety is a good thing because it forces you to be more present to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's
Yeah. I like that you said that because that's the one thing I took away from doing it. I'm less than a year in stand up, and like the first time I went up, I was like, I've never done anything that I was so in the moment. Like
Yeah.
I was being right there, right then, not reflecting on anything.
Right.
Like it was happening.
Yeah, because you're more concerned with performing that, yet
yeah.
making sure it comes out the way you want it to. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's huge. So
Yeah.
I relate to that very tough.
Another thing that I've been thinking about the other day. So I follow a content creator who talks a lot about her experience with ASD. I think she goes by La Fila Danny on TikTok. She was a guest last year during our autism awareness episode. Recently, she did a video talking about people are constantly telling her she's a funny person, and it just dawned on her that she isn't a funny person. They're laughing at her being herself. She doesn't know she's saying funny things. And someone, I forget who, but shout out to them first of all. But someone had commented how that is something that they are constantly thinking about because they are, like me, a comedian with neurodivergency, and they have a theory that it's a common point of development for comedians that have some kind of neurodivergency, where it stems from them just figuring out why people are laughing at them and then converting that into jokes. Like the way they phrase it is like, your jokes are stemming from what you think autistic people think are funny. Autistic is the term for non-autistic people, not neurotypical people.
Right. I always thought that my humor came from kind of like my inability to like cope with things, so I would just use that as a trauma response.
Yeah.
Instead of like dwelling on the painful aspect of it, I would be like, well, you know how people will try to make you feel better about something shitty that happened, and you're just like, I guess, it's almost like your brain doing that for you,
Yeah.
That was like a big thing in my family. Like my grandma always says, like, because my grandpa used to say, you got, if you can't laugh at yourself, it was like that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
If you can't laugh at yourself, what can you laugh at, kind of a thing.
Exactly.
You got to take the good. You got to just make things funny, because if not, you're gonna have a real bad time.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes if you're just constantly joking about something that's fucked up, it's almost as if you're not allowing yourself to process those feelings too. Right. So that can also be dangerous.
It can.
Yeah.
And I think that was along the lines of what they were getting at. Like, I think that is something that's prevalent in comedy in general. Yeah. A lot of comedians, that's what their journey starts as, is them learning to cope with things. And that's why it's so common, the sad clown trope is so common in comedians. And I think where it goes a step further in this person's description, because they were specifically talking about autistic comedians, I do feel that their theory can extend to neurodivergency in general. But like, there's definitely jokes I've written because I knew that other people would think they were funny. Right. Like I did this joke. I used to do this joke where I was like, a lot of people my age talk about their inner animal. I think that mine would be a house cat because I'm autistic, and it's like, and I did this comparison where I was like, autistics are very like house cats, where they don't talk a lot, they keep to themselves, and if two are next to each other, one's gonna bite the other. And that got a laugh, and I knew that it would get a laugh. But the more I told it, the more I lived with that joke, the more I realized why are they laughing at that? Why did I know they were laughing at that? Right. And it's like I had to face they're laughing at it because they don't understand what autism is. So they just think of those kids that are weird, those kids that bite, those kids that lick things, And so that's the comparison they're making when I tell that joke, and that's why they're laughing. And once I established that, I knew why I was so uncomfortable telling the joke. Oh. So it's no longer a joke I tell, but it does, it correlates with that theory that the other person was saying, where I was like, a lot of the jokes that I wrote at the beginning were based on how I thought I was perceived. Yeah. Rather than how I saw myself. And I think that what made me a better comedian is that transition where I still make jokes about misunderstanding as an autistic person, because it is a funny situation from the perspective of someone who has that context. And so that becomes the joke. It's yeah, that happened to me, but that's because I didn't have context, and that's what's funny about it. I also evolved some of my humor to be about my perspective, so that I could tell, so I can explain to people, this is why my things are frustrating. Mm-hmm. I do a joke about my mom sometimes saying, well, I don't think you're as autistic as you say you are. And it's that's not how it works. Yeah. And it's that's if I said, I don't think you're as short as you say you are.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And so I think that I agree with that sentiment, that's maybe where it started with me, is figuring out. For me, though, it wasn't that I was figuring out why I was being laughed at. It was that I was figuring out what was funny about it and being able to recreate that intentionally.
Oh, okay. Because, if you told that cat joke right now, I wouldn't be laughing at the fact that the kids bite. I'd be laughing at the fact that it's a funny visual. Yeah. Seeing two kids, I've seen two cats fight. That's hilarious. Yeah. But that's also because I feel like in my head, I'm just going into a different part of it. You
For
know,
sure.
I'm not looking at it in that way where like, yeah, these people are different and I'm
Right.
associating it with that. It's just more of a funny.
Same for me. If a kid bites another kid, autistic or not, I'm laughing.
Yeah, and I think that's where I would take it now.
Yeah.
Where it came from when I first wrote it was
Oh,
like
okay.
I
Right.
understood what they were expecting from me.
Oh, okay. I
Right,
see
I
what you're
understand.
saying.
Yeah,
Yeah. Trying to like show out for the white man.
exactly. I guess, yeah.
No, but I have this joke that I know it's probably my best. It's the best part of the chunk of my joke of where I talk about what schizophrenia is like, and it's kind of like a preamble into like my other stuff where I say most people ask what schizophrenia is like, and I said it's usually I could practice all these jokes in a dark room alone and I'd still have an audience laughing. You know what I mean? That's essentially what it means. And then I go into the joke about, because there's this one time where this man was arguing with me and, you know, like I guess they're like, you know, everybody always associates schizophrenia when you hear it, they always think, oh, that guy is a fucking, he's going to go loose with a gun. You know what I mean? Because every time after every mass shooting, there's like, this guy was diagnosed with schizophrenia. You know what I mean? And I'm like, every time I saw that, I was like, that's not good. I've even had family members that would be like, so when is your turn? And I was like, that's a shitty thing to say.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know what I mean? Like, why would you tell me that? And I was like, we don't all want to kill everybody. We just want to kill our families now. You know what I mean? Especially when you say shit like that to us. Like, dude, I would not go after a bunch of random people. Like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then second of all, I am scared of loud noises. I don't think I could shoot a gun. Like that would terrify. I would be like, I'd freak out, you know? I don't think I could do that. I just it's not that I've thought about it, but when people have brought it up, you know, like I remember my mom, she was one of them too, you know, she was all like, she was worried that if she said something fucked up to me that I was going to go on a murderous rampage. And I told her, Mom, just don't say shit to me. You know what I mean?
Don't say shit to me,
don't
Mom.
be fucked up. Like, you know, it's like, I'm not thinking of murder. That's the last thing I'm thinking
It
of.
reminds me of that conversation between like an atheist and a Christian where it's like, well, if you don't believe in God, then why are you not an evil person? It's like, because I don't want to be. Like,
Right, exactly. Like,
shouldn't
it's a
need
choice.
to be told not to be shitty.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a choice, you know, like why do you, here's the question, why do you need God to prevent you from doing shitty things?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you can't self-regulate. You don't,
Yeah.
you'd have to have somebody, you know, threaten you with eternal damnation in order for you not to take lives. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
It's like-
why is that?
Yeah.
And I will even go as far as like, that's not to say that you shouldn't, you know, that's not to dismiss religion altogether completely, but it is to point out like a lot of people fuel their decisions with that.
Right.
And because of that, you know, that leads to complications. That leads to this whole like mob mentality. It leads to like misinterpretation of the
Yeah.
intent.
Right, exactly. Because I mean, I don't believe that all Christians can't, you know, refrain from killing other people. That's true. But then it's also the same mindset where you shouldn't think that all people with schizophrenia are dangerous.
Exactly.
Because we're not. Most of the time, we're victims.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're victims of abuse because people realize that they could just easily come back and blame our mental
Yeah.
illness on us. They're like, no, that person's faking it. No, they have and I've had this happen to me. I've been in fucked up relationships where they'll turn around and they'll tell me, no, she's pretending, she's got a mental illness. You can't listen to her.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact numbers of it, but there's a statistical phenomena behind it where like I think I don't remember the numbers, but it is in the ratio what's the word?
Statistic, the ratio, percentage.
There's a specific word I'm looking for. In favor, not in favor.
The odds?
More often than not.
Okay.
You know, 9 out of 10 times a person, specifically in this region, it's people with schizophrenia and people with autism, but it leans more on people with schizophrenia where they're more likely to be the victims of hate crimes or crimes in general than they are the perpetrators.
Yeah. And that's because when they explain it, and this is on the part of the police too, because they're the ones that are there enforcing the law, they will more often side with the person who is perpetrating the crime against the person, because they quickly say that person is making it up. They have schizophrenia. They've been in the hospital. It's their aberration of reality that is causing them to imagine that I was, beating on them. And I had an ex that did this to me, where he would physically assault me. And then when I called the cops and the police showed up, they were like, no, she's faking it. She's pretending. She's lying. She has a mental illness. You can't listen to her. And that happened to me for years. And it made it worse. And this guy, it took me actually moving away to a different address for him to stop coming after me. He would send me emails and stuff. I have emails of him messaging me and then stuff like that. Like, that's the kind of, and people used to always think, oh, she's crazy. She's making this up. I'm like, no, I actually have receipts of him doing this. Right. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't, and then he's also like looked me up and like tried to find out where I live, and he got access to like my new phone numbers and stuff like that, and that's how he would call me to just harass me. And I would tell people, like, I'm not making this up. This dude is like harassing me. Luckily, I found out he's got diabetes, so he's fighting. So he's fighting his own battles. Like, if karma does not exist, I feel like that's a big sign.
Funny.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff makes me so mad of just people doing that kind of stuff, like trying to capitalize on your condition. That's what it seems like.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's definitely like a more, because
I never even thought about that.
Brain fart.
About being like having a social deficiency and somebody
somebody trying to take advantage of you.
Taking advantage of you.
Just because they're shitty people and they want someone else to beat up.
Man.
Yeah, and it's
that's disgusting to me, and I've had it happen so often to me. This is the reason why I'm very cautious with who I open up with. Yeah. Because I've had things like that. And I mean, granted, like my mom, she's told me that too. She's like, you got to be careful with who you tell this to, because there's people out there that are just going to go out. They're just going to want to take advantage of you.
No, yeah. Even if it's not to that extreme, it's something that's like any interaction that has that potential where it's a danger, this is definitely to a much lesser extent, but even like having autism, people infantilize autism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't take me seriously when they find out. Even if they knew me before and they like were comfortable around me, they just thought I was a little off. Once they figure out that it's because of autism, all of a sudden they are more cautious with me. Oh. And it's definitely not an equivalent. I can't even imagine like what that would be like. But overall, like it's one of these things where there's still people who, because they don't want to talk about it, it's always in the background, so they're always ready to do anything, do all the mental gymnastics necessary to ignore it. Right.
But you were talking about the infantilized or kind of like reduce you to somebody that doesn't know how to make your own decisions as an adult, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's like, and I've talked about this before, where like there will be people that think that because you have an illness that you should not have a sense of autonomy. Like you're unable to make your own decisions. That's not true. That is probably the worst way to go about treating somebody with, you don't do that. You treat them with dignity, give them the ability to do things on their own. And then you'll see, yes, we can do things on our own. We just do it different. You know what I mean? We just do it different. But I've had that happen so often, even with certain friends that I've had to be like, you know what? I don't need this shit. I don't need you. It's almost like they're trying to mother you, but you're like, that's not giving me dignity. You know what I mean? It's like you're stripping me of it by trying to make decisions for me. You know what I mean? Like that's not the way to do it.
That's definitely a thing. It's definitely easier to explain now that I'm more vocal and now that I'm like an adult, like almost 30. But it was part of even during my 20s, it was a thing where I have to be like, I understand that it's I'm not asking you to just immediately forgive any mistake I make. I'm asking you to let me learn from those.
Right.
Because if I make a mistake the first time and then you just don't let me do that thing ever again, I never learn how to do it. And you always have to do it for me. And then now you resent me because you think I can't function the way, And there's things I do struggle with that do affect my functioning. But when it's like those small things, it's like that's not what we should be worried about. It's like I can learn how to, going back to the cooking things, like I still mess up sometimes. Sometimes I forget about the stove and I burn things, but normal people burn food. Like I am no longer that little kid that doesn't know how the stove works and leaves it on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And not to take away everything you're saying right now, but you said you did it 3 times.
I had ADHD, right?
No, look, come on.
I'll give you twice. 3 times.
No.
I ain't trusting
There
you with the
are
stove
probably
again.
people out there that are more normal than us that have burned their house down, okay?
Yeah.
And their
facts.
insurance replaces their house and is
Sure.
like, hey,
You don't
know what?
how many YouTube videos I've seen of somebody blowing up their house because they tried to boil a turkey.
Right.
Oh, no. But
But
it
I'm
is...
not trusting you with the turkey again. You burned my house down once.
But
That's
He
strike
blew
3.
up his own house.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying like that person loses turkey duty. He's not doing turkey next year.
I guarantee you that dude's cooking it the next year.
Yeah, probably. But it's
Not
true.
around.
It's true. People will, overwhelmingly deny us that ability to have autonomy. You know what I mean? Like it's almost as if they're saying, well, your brain isn't good enough. Let me do it for you. And it's like, that's not what that means.
And it's such an unfortunate thing because I can put myself on both sides because I'm not neurodivergent, but like my sister is autistic, and so like there's certain things that we've gone through that I can remember being like, I got this time. Like, don't even worry about it. But it's more for the sake of efficiency than it is me being like, oh, you're incapable or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's like, I know that this task stresses you out, so I'm just gonna, for lack of a better reference, Louis C.K. has a reference where he's talking about opening kids' milks. Do you know that? And he's like, it's not less stressful for me. I just deal with the stress better than the kid does of trying to open the carton. You know what I mean?
Right.
So sometimes when I'm doing that, because I will say I have done that, and I'm more being like, oh well, let me just take care of this for the both of us. It's more of a like, I'm trying to like help.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it out of being like, oh, you're not.
You're not trying to diminutize them.
No. But I can understand
you
how
are.
that. Yeah. No. It's
But
true.
you are.
Yeah, I can understand how that would be a result because you don't get to learn and you don't get to like take. I don't know.
Yeah.
If I always take on the burden, then you don't grow.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been times where. And I've told my sister this because she was used to doing things for me. I say, you got to let me do this shit on my own, So then I started learning how to do it. And I say, I will come to you if I need help. If I've already reached my moment, my peak of like stress, I will come to you. Because I do have my own podcast. And this is one of the funniest things. It's a podcast on mental health. I was struggling to upload episodes onto my YouTube channel because I just didn't know how shit worked. I had no fucking idea how to process a damn thing. And my sister's better at these kinds of things. I remember getting so frustrated. I wanted to throw my computer. And instead of throwing my computer, because I realized if I threw my computer, that'd be the end of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Instead of throwing my computer, I bit my arm because that's where the frustration went. Like I bit my bicep.
Yeah. I totally understand that.
And my sister was looking at me like, do you need help now? And I said, yes, I do. This is now. Right. This is the moment.
Right. So yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to know that balance. You know what I mean? Because like, I don't know your sister, but I don't want to see my sister bite her arm. I don't want her to get to that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it still
So-
taught me. It still taught me
right.
to realize, okay, when you need help, you need to ask for it.
Right.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
for sure.
That's
For
what
sure.
it taught me. Yeah, because
That's a big deal.
she had this tendency of doing everything for me, but never explaining it to me. And I was like,
Right.
well, what about when I need to do it? I have to be
Yeah.
able to do it on my own. You know, you can't just do it all for me all the
Right.
time. I have to know how to navigate through things.
Yeah, like that's how I learned how to do a lot of things. Was like after a while, I took it. This was like a thing I did. I took it upon myself to do, but like basic things that would just be. I think about like, what if I had to live on my own? You know, right now I struggle with that because there's certain things I can't do. Like small example, not small. I'm going all over the place. I can't drive, so I require other people to have for assistance with that. But in other ways, you know, I have learned to become self-sufficient. Like that's how I learned to cook. Is I would literally just start asking my mom about, and it turned out to be a huge bonding moment for the both of us because
Right.
her father was the one who taught her how to cook for the most part, and she had all these memories of cooking with him, not only as a child but even like he was gone for a long portion of her childhood, so they reconnected when they were both adults, and that was also a thing. You know, she often tells the story, which I'm going to butcher, and I apologize. She tells it way better. But the short of it is that towards the end of his life, he was going blind. And even then, by memory and by sense of smell, he could tell how long things were supposed to cook and when
Oh,
someone was adding
wow.
something. So, like, we'd be cooking rice, and you just, like, see him go... And then he leans and in Spanish he'd be like, "Mija, turn off the stove. The rice is about to burn."
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah.
And he was accurate every
Yes,
time.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And so that became a thing between me and my mom, where I learned how to cook from her, and then that evolved into me learning her recipes, and then wanting to not improve on that, but improve on my own skills. Resulted in me finding a passion that I didn't know I had for cooking. Like that's what led to me creating my own recipes and like
okay.
learning new things. And now it's like, you know, maybe I can't drive, but if you come over, I can feed you. You know, it's
Right.
I love that. Yeah.
it's a point. It's like a point of victory for me, where it's like I can definitely do something on my own.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I know how to drive, but cooking, I'm not too great at that. No, I'm not great. I know how to drive because my dad is a professional driver, so that's
Right.
like a skill. He was like, you better know how to fucking do this shit, you know? And I always get upset when people have that stereotype of like women don't know how to drive, and I'm like, I'll fucking teach you. Like, you know what I mean?
No, I totally know what you mean. My grandfather was very into cars, and my mom got that from him.
Yeah.
And so in my family, my mom's the car person, and my dad doesn't know anything about cars.
Oh yeah, no, my mom is a car person for sure, but she knows how to fix them instead of, you know, my mom's not too good with like directions or anything.
Oh.
But when it comes to me and directions, all you have to do is just give me like freeways and stuff, and I'm like, I know exactly where you
Right.
are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was always a thing for me, though. Yeah, my mom, she's a driver. We drive
Yeah.
far.
I think both my parents have tried teaching me how to drive, and it's not that I couldn't learn how to do it, but a lot of things got in my way, like physically got in my way. One of the biggest
People.
things.
People physically out here, right? That's funny. That's
That's the
good.
sidewalk. No, it's not. I swear. No, like they
All
take
these
me.
stop signs in my way.
Like one time I was taken to an empty parking lot, and I think it was my mom and her partner at the time were teaching me to drive, and I picked up on the actual procedures of like, you know, changing gears and the easing into a parking space. I think they taught me how to parallel park, but had I pursued it, I think I could have picked up the actual like skills of the procedure. What was an issue for me is two major things. One of them is when I actually would try to get on the road, my anxiety levels would be to such an extent that I didn't get like blurry vision, but I was like, it became hard for me to focus. I was too spread out mentally. Everything was a thing to me.
I think now that you're describing those symptoms, I think my sister has exactly the same kind of thing. I know, and here's a funny. I mean, I'm not saying she might actually have autism, and we've suspected it, but she's never been tested for it. You know what I mean? We know she has like major depressive disorder, but like on the spectrum of autism, like I don't know. There was always something about you that I thought was very familiar, and I was like,
that does remind me of one clarification because I get it all the time in my comments. There is two spectrums. There is the neurodivergent spectrum, which you referenced earlier, Nips, and then autism spectrum is a completely separate thing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's two different things.
She might just be neurodivergent then, but I know that there's something there that she's never tested for, you know what I mean? Because I feel like it would just be heartbreak for my mom.
Right.
and I don't know, like just the way you're describing it, I was like, that sounds exactly like my sister.
Yeah.
And she had trouble learning how to drive too. She had a lot of trouble learning how to drive. She did the same thing, blurred vision, she'll panic and
and the second thing is that I have partial blindness in my right eye.
Okay.
I say partial because I can still receive image.
Right.
But it's incredibly blurry. I have no depth perception. I've practiced. Every time I try to reach for something, I end up either not reaching far enough or I overdo it and I knock stuff over.
Is it anything that you can fix with corrective lenses? No?
No. At this point, it's to an extent where the corrective lenses they could give me did not improve it enough to require it. Like if I get glasses, this eye gets as close as they can get, but they're more focused on this eye because it's the one that sees better.
You have no depth perception?
Not in my right eye.
Well,
you do need depth perception to drive,
but
for sure.
But depth perception comes from two eyes.
Yeah, but
there's no depth perception in a single eye.
No. But if he's saying this affects because of the vision,
that's what
it affects his depth perception.
Okay.
It's like having like two cameras. You know, if like one camera is off, the other camera is going to be even more fucked up. You know what I mean?
It's like what's the term when it's like optical perspective, forced perspective. My left eye has an issue with that where I do believe like to an extent the combination of them gives me depth perception.
Yeah.
But when I close my left eye, I can't decipher how far things are. I can't interpret the depth.
Yeah, because you don't have the other eye working with you.
Yeah, I don't have the context of the other eye.
I want to say that's a thing.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. But it's because one eye is messed up. That affects his depth perception.
In general,
is what he's saying.
I have depth perception issues, but specifically, so what I'm getting at to with my right eye is when both eyes are open, I have a blind spot because my brain is focusing on everything on the left side. So even though my right eye is capable of knowing that like my hand is right here, I can't see that. It's like the thing you were talking about that point perspective.
Right.
There's like another one on the side of my eye when both eyes are open.
Oh, so you naturally have a blind spot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not safe.
No.
You shouldn't be driving.
First people to agree with. No, but it's a thing where like I could. I talk to doctors about it all the time. They can't gauge where it's at because they can't see what I'm seeing.
Okay.
So I've gotten a variety of different responses. Some people think that some doctors think that I could learn to cope with it, and it's a lot of like turning. But I tell people like that's I'd have to turn all the way, which is dangerous at the wheel. Like I can't tell when something's coming up on my side.
Yeah, that would definitely affect you driving at night for sure.
Yeah, that was
right.
To me that was the biggest thing, and I explained to people where it's like as a comedian living in Los Angeles, the two times where I would absolutely need to drive is to go from city to city, which means on the freeway, and to drive at night to shows.
Yeah,
I have too much anxiety on the freeway to handle that. And that was the thing that I remember my dad and I talking about it. He accepted as like, yeah, I wouldn't recommend you driving on freeways because I would panic at the wheel just driving streets. And then at night, I can't see in the dark.
Yeah.
And
because if you already have a blind spot, like the darkness is a big blind spot.
And because of, I also have a astigmatism?
Oh, no. Yeah, I know what those are. I have. That's why I have glasses, because I have
one
astigmatism.
One of the side effects that I particularly have is a sensitivity to bright lights. So at night, I don't know if like, because some people don't. It's a thing I can't process. Some people don't see the stars, but like lights form little starlets.
Like a bouquet, almost like
because my brain is perceiving like where the light's going, if that makes sense.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying. Yeah, I have astigmatism too. So
Right, and so those lights, those stars are very large, and they get in the way of me being able to perceive. Like I can't read road signs because of the lights. I can't see.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes I can't see where cars are coming from because of the light, and that's just me
Yeah.
as a passenger. So like me behind the wheel would be dangerous.
Yeah,
this
yeah,
sounds like
yeah.
being on acid. to
Yeah,
me.
because it is. It's kind of like that feeling,
Yeah.
I guess. But you know, it's almost as if I took off my glasses and started driving without them. Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
so,
And
yeah.
I've had people ask me like, "Can you fix astigmatism?" I'm like, "No, you can't, because it's the shape of your eye. You
Right.
can't.
Yes,
You
yeah,
can't go
yeah.
in there and like they're like, doesn't LASIK help?" I said, "Does it? I've never heard that as an
As a
option."
kid,
Because like
so.
physically, you would astigmatism is like if you went and you shoved your finger in your eye and then you could see normal after that. It's because of the shape. It's the ocular
Right.
shape.
It's
Yeah.
curved
Right.
irregularly.
and
Yeah.
so so I have the stigmatism in both eyes, but in the right eye, it's because of a physical deformation. So the best that we can speculate is around the time of like 5 years old, something happened to me where I cut my cornea, and I was always so scared of the idea of a laser, so they tried to heal it naturally.
Yeah.
And I will take culpability in the sense that I begged them not to laser it, but I was also like 5 years old.
The technology wasn't that great in those days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
But so what ended up happening is it healed kind of curved looking.
Oh.
So I have to explain every time I go to the eye doctor, which I haven't been in a long time. That
I
is
think
my
I
fault.
understand. Like it created like a scar tissue somewhat.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have to, whenever I do go to the optometrist, I have to explain that history to them because it looks like keratoconus to them,
Oh, okay.
which is the thing my brother Dominic has.
Okay, that's crazy. That's wild.
Think of a question. We got to wrap this.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
But first,
Yeah.
thank you for coming. Thank you for being on our show. It was
Oh,
great
yeah,
having you.
no,
It was
this
very
was great.
informative. Yeah, I learned a lot. I was trying to be quiet and just learn because I don't have, neurodivergency. And so I want to know as much as I can to be accommodating to you. Anyways,
You're like, are you sure?
I tease him a lot about it.
so if there's anything you want to plug, you could plug your show and stuff right
Oh
now.
yeah. I mean, I have a lot of shows. I guess you could just follow me on Instagram. My name is Doc Hollywood. Everyone always thinks I'm a doctor, but I dropped out of medical school. It's just DOC for Department of Corrections because that's what
That's
I'm
so
most
funny.
that's what I'm most familiar with. And I also really kind of like enjoyed The Shining. So when the little kid
Right.
he would do this, so I always thought, yeah, that was a funny thing. So Doc _Hollywood _ and then I also do have a mental health podcast called It's Gonna Be Okay, but you can find that on the handle of @FunTherapy_podcast. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll have
Yeah.
links in the description.
Yeah, we'll
and
make sure to
I'll
put
put it at
those
the
in.
bottom of the screen. right here, too.
Excellent. Yeah, cool. And just I guess tag me and everything, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then also this episode will be out on this Wednesday. So if you have shows, do you have any shows that you want to plug or anything?
This
Shit.
comes out Wednesday the 5th.
That comes out Wednesday the 5th.
I think so.
Whatever this Wednesday is.
Yeah.
I have a show I'm doing Cal State San Bernardino. That's a pretty big thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So
What day is that?
that's on Thursday though, so it's the next day.
Okay. So tomorrow.
Yeah.
So come-
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
If you're in San Bernardino.
Yeah, if you're in San Bernardino and you want to go see a women's show.
Nice.
Yeah, university women's show. Yeah.
Nice.
Pretty
Awesome.
much. Yeah.
Well, it's been a great episode. Thanks again. We've loved having you. Final question for the audience. If you've made it this far, what's something your parents ignored because they're Latino? And also, before we do the sign out,
all right.
last thing, a lot of great new content is coming on the Patreon. Be sure to check that out. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, follow us on Spotify, leave reviews. As Dominic always says, 5 stars, please. And oh shit, I fucked it up. It's comments. Be
Yeah.
sure to comment on this the question because comments make you sexy. And from us, I know I fucked it up. We're
It's all right.
leaving it.
We're
We're doing it
We're
live.
doing it. We're doing
From
it.
us at Un Poquito, don't
Fly.
fly. Yeah.
Nice.